Well, has the worm started to turn against Donald Trump? Are we seeing a moment where the people are clamoring for the impeachment of Donald Trump, to have articles of impeachment considered by the House to impeach him for a record third time? And I'm not just going to follow the petition drive of over 500,000 people who have joined calling for his impeachment, Trump's impeachment. I'm not just going to cover on this hot take the Democratic members of the House that have already drawn up articles of impeachment. I'm going to talk about the 25th Amendment and its use here, and more particularly about new reporting coming out of Salon and Salon magazine by Brian Karem, in which some of the people in the inner sanctum of Donald Trump, we've got insiders who are starting to question the out and out lawlessness and criminality. Those are their words of Donald Trump and what they can do about it from the inside. See? Now the scales are starting to drop from the eyes of people who followed Donald Trump into the belly of the beast and then found out he was the beast. Only on Legal AF, let's look at what's happening in America. It's not just the polling numbers that show that Donald Trump is in the tank. 39%, 40%, doesn't matter whether you look at the Fox News poll, the Washington Post poll, the ABC or New York Times poll, he is below water. Worst polling numbers in the history of polling in the first 100 days and no end in sight. It's not just that. It's not just the people who have taken to the streets in record numbers, the 5501 marches, the marches about Law Day and the rule of law, the resistance movement being led by federal judges who may be uncomfortable about having to put themselves in the middle of a political process, but they are the firewall for the protection of our democracy. It's not just the 500,000 people who have signed a petition in order to impeach Donald Trump and call on Congress to do their job. Now, we all know, let's manage expectations. Congress is currently in the control of the Republicans. And while the Democrats can introduce articles of impeachment all they want, and it'll get some press, including here on Legal AF, they're not going to get passed until Congress is controlled by the Democrats. You know, to paraphrase Patrick Henry, give me the midterms and I'll give you impeachment and conviction of Donald Trump and removal from office. It's really that simple. He's already done the things. He's already done the illegal, illicit, unconstitutional abuse of power conduct that justifies his impeachment and removal. Now it's time to exercise and trigger those mechanisms and make it happen. Now, Brian Karem in Salon, he talked about an insider he has on the inside, obviously an insider on the inside. Sorry, it's been a long morning. And basically that person has become disillusioned, joined the administration because thought that woke culture had divided this country, and now realizes it's Trump and MAGA that has done that. And so there is talk inside about what to do about the problem named Donald Trump. They see the problem, according to the reporting of Brian Karem. They just don't see a solution. This person, in talking to the reporter, who I'm sure will now be prosecuted for some sort of leak, said to Brian Karem, "We don't trust Congress. We don't trust the press, and the judges has, as of yet, been unable to stop him." So they don't know what to do. But I think this is a growing movement. Now, some people have said, all right, well, if the worm is starting to turn internally and people that are inside, just as they did in the first administration with Donald Trump, are starting to have misgivings, second thoughts about serving this administration or promoting or enabling Donald Trump and his worst instincts that go to abuse of power and tyranny, could that lead to some sort of 25th Amendment solution? And let's just cover that for a minute. There is an amendment, of the Constitution, been on the books since the 1960s after the JFK assassination and some sort of sloppy transition that went on between the Kennedy administration and the incoming Johnson administration, and they passed the 25th Amendment. There is an involuntary provision for removal under Section 4 of the 25th Amendment. but it's very specific. The vice president, remember J.D. Vance? You barely see him. He's on so many foreign tours. You think he was a third-rate rock band, from the 80s, touring the world, on their past glory. I mean, at the places he pops up, and every time he pops up, something bad happens. Goes to India or near it, we have a war with Pakistan. Visits the Pope, we get a new Pope. He's like Schleprock. He's not. Let's just put it this way: he's the cooler, that you would use in a casino. So if somebody's on a hot streak, you stick J.D. Vance behind him so that the house can collect back all of its money. Let's just call him that. So cooler J.D. Vance is going to have to join. First and foremost, he has to join with a majority of Donald Trump's cabinet. Now think about his cabinet for a minute. Howard Lutnick, right? Cabinet member. Pete Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, John Ratcliffe, RFK Jr., Dr. Oz, Kristi Noem, Pam Bondi. Stop me in comments if you think we're going to be able to get a majority, not even 2/3, just the majority of any of the people that I just talked about, of the more than almost 24 cabinet members, let's say 20 or so. We're going to get a majority of them with that core group to support a finding of incapacity, by mental incapacity or otherwise, of Donald Trump to take him out? I don't think so. But if somehow I was wrong and Donald Trump gets even more lawless, and I'll cover here the places in the last 72 hours where that's been indicated, the vice president joined with a majority of the cabinet can vote together to remove him. He is then instantly removed. And if he objects to the removal, which he would, he has to take his case to the House and the Senate and obtain a 2/3 vote to be reinstalled in the seat, which he'll never get. So the easy part is, if it ever gets to the House and Senate, the Republicans don't control 2/3 of the House and the Senate. He'd never be able to get put back into office. But look, J.D. Vance is going to grow a spine and a pair of brass ones, and he's going to take on King Trump. Not in anybody's wildest imagination, but it is on the books. That's the 25th Amendment. Let's talk about the impeachment articles and this insider. If this insider is the canary in the coal mine, does it indicate that there are other people in senior positions of power that are starting to have second thoughts? And the military is going to have to stand ready, because at some point, if Donald Trump's not going to leave, or he's going to do something illegal or unconstitutional, they may have to step forward to protect civilian command and control in this country, as Donald Trump tries to weaponize the military, turn it against the American people on domestic soil in violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. Now, let me turn to just the comments in the last less than a week. I thought, and this, no matter how devastating and how startling and staggering this comment was by Donald Trump when he was being interviewed by Kristen Welker about due process and the Constitution, which did not get it. It's just Trump fatigue. You can see it. We have to fight through it here on Legal AF as well. But you have to get past the eye rolling and the fatigue and shoulder shrugging, and recognize these statements for these extraordinary, staggers the imagination and the mind comments by Donald Trump. I thought his comment to Kristen Welker on his interview for NBC, where she's pressed him on due process, and he said, "No, I don't know. Well, due process. Do I have to give due process to people? I don't know. I have very good lawyers. I leave it with them. I don't really know." He's the leader of the free world. He took a constitutional oath, not once, but twice, to preserve, defend, and protect the Constitution of the United States. And he doesn't understand what the Fifth Amendment means about due process rights. So that was with Kristen Welker, right? We've all seen that clip. Then we have yesterday his primary henchman, who's effectively the shadow president. We always thought it was Elon Musk, but it was Barzini all along. It's Stephen Miller all along. He's the one that apparently has walk-in rights. He's the only person that is allowed to bust through the front door of the Oval Office and see Trump unannounced. And he loves bending his ear. He's not a lawyer, but he plays one in the White House. And Stephen Miller is the architect of all these crazy, unconstitutional immigration, deportation, use of the Alien Enemies Act, and all roads lead back to Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller, obviously with the permission of the president, as his proxy, takes to a news conference and says the unthinkable, that the president of the United States is thinking about suspending the writ of habeas corpus, just basically suspending the Constitution because we're under an invasion. Look out your window. Are we being invaded by Tren de Aragua or Venezuela? Have you ever met anybody from Tren de Aragua? Have you ever met anybody that knew anybody that met anybody from Tren de Aragua? Are you 6 degrees separated? Or are you 1,000 degrees separated? Because it's not really going on. There's no enemy combatant in this country that is a proxy for Venezuela in a war. But to Stephen Miller, it's grounds, and Donald Trump, it's grounds to suspend the Constitution and the Fifth Amendment. What it is grounds for is grounds for impeachment. That's why the petitions calling for public pressure, right? We talk about talking truth to each other first here. Public pressure on the Trump administration and calls for impeachment may not result in anything, but if we get, instead of 500,000 signatures on that petition, we get several million to reflect the polling, which says people are in favor of impeaching Donald Trump as he continues to disobey the Supreme Court and orders of federal courts. That will put political pressure and give some political cover. We already have elected officials for the Republicans who don't want to go home to their home districts because they don't want to go to town halls because they don't want to get openly criticized and yelled at by a rebellious group against the Trump administration. So we have to we know that they're feckless. We know they don't have a backbone. So we have to pressure them. And taking to the streets and signing petitions is a way to do that. Call your congressperson, call your senator, pressure them to draw up, vote on, and vote for articles of impeachment against Donald Trump. Keep up that fight in the streets and here in our community, in our fellowship that we're building on Legal AF. And we'll continue to report on Stephen Miller, who's basically the puppet master for Donald Trump. He often sits there to get the last word in. He's the last one to bend Donald Trump's ear. Donald Trump likes to hear Stephen Miller talk, and Stephen Miller lies to him. Stephen Miller lies to Donald Trump, as does Pam Bondi, particularly about the results of the Supreme Court decisions. Now, Donald Trump has to be able to still read, right? He knows he lost, for instance, 9-0 at the United States Supreme Court in the Abrego Garcia case. 9-0. But he asked Stephen Miller during a White House Oval Office presser, Stephen, how'd we do in that case? Oh, we won. He said he won because they had one line in the 9-0 decision that said, in foreign affairs, the president has powers that can't be infringed. What does it have to do with the Alien Enemies Act? What does that have to do with sending people without due process to El Salvador? Nothing. But to the Trump administration, it's like Dumb and Dumber. You know, they hear one little line that they contort and twist out of shape in a 2-paragraph decision by the Supreme Court, and you're saying there's a chance? Yeah, there's no chance. I'll continue to follow it right here. Stay active, stay engaged, lean forward, not back. And what we say around here for the Maple Midas, elbows up. And we'll join together. Hit the subscribe button today on Legal AF as we continue to grow this pro-democracy channel. Listen to Legal AF, the podcast, over on the Midas Touch Network. And we got a new Substack, Legal AF, the Substack, where we post all sorts of things like documents from court filings and cases so you can read them yourself. We've got my morning briefing called Legal AF, Morning AF, obviously, and other contributors are there as well. And free versions of our Legal AF podcast are listed on Legal AF, the Substack. So until my next reporting, I'm Michael Popok. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.